Okay, good morning, everybody. I think we should get started. We're going to be finishing the chapter today. This is a long chapter about the laws of Hashavas Aveda, about returning lost items and the responsibilities of guardianship when you are entrusted with someone else's property. There's been a lot of ins and outs. The last thing that we spoke about was to review this issue of the status of non-observant Jews in the modern world, and as we recalled from the Chazon Ish, today all non-observant Jews have the status of Tinok Shenishba, of complete onus, and they should not be held responsible in any way for any kind of punitive measures against them, and they are considered to be our brethren. So, and therefore the mitzvah of Hashavas Aved applies to them. Okay, we're going to see the last halacha today, which is Mem, and he writes as follows: Afal pi shemamono shel chavero nitche mipnei kvodo. He says that we're going to create a contrast in this halacha, that even though your friend's assets do not take priority over your own honor, like we learned before. If something is beneath your honor, it will bring you dishonor by engaging in returning his lost objects, so then you can exempt yourself. So even though that's true, eno nitcha mipnei kvodo shel aviv v'imo, but you cannot use, let's say, your parents' honor as an excuse to avoid the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. Now, what do we mean by that? We know that there's a mitzvah of kibbud av va'em, and it's a very important mitzvah. The Torah, it's one of the two mitzvahs where the Torah says you get long life if you perform this mitzvah. So you might think, therefore, that if my parents ask me to do something for them, and that precludes me from returning the lost object, so then I can exempt myself from Hashavas Aveda. So this halacha is telling us that no, it does not. And if you take a look in the, we'll see that in just a second. He says, Afal pi shuhukshak vodam lichvod hamakom. And that's true even though honoring my parents is linked to honoring God. As the Gemara says, that honoring your parents is tantamount to honoring Hashem, because ish imo ve'aviv tira'u. Actually, we'll see that the Imrei Yaakov gives us a different pasuk from the Gemara. He says, if you take a look in Kuf Samach Beis, he says, Shuhuksha kvodam lichvod hamakom, because the honor of one's parent is linked to the honor of Hashem. D'ne'amar kabedas avicha ve'esimecha, because one pasuk says, honor your father and mother. D'ne'amar kabedas Hashem mehoncha, and another pasuk says, honor God with your wealth. That's a pasuk from the Navi. So what we see from here is Hishva hakasuv av va'em lichvod hamakom. It says both by my parents kabed. It says in reference to God kabed. So we see that I'm supposed to honor them equally. And so you might think, therefore, that my parents' honor takes priority over doing this mitzvah. So he says no. She'im omar lo aviv al tachzir ha'aveda achshav ki tzarich ani achshav she'ta'achileni v'tashkeni, that if his father says to him, listen, son, what are you doing on Sunday? So you say, well, Dad, I have this lost object and I got to drive up to Ashua to return the lost object to its owner. And the father says, no, I need you for something. I need you to take me on an errand, to take me out to the I'm going to take you out to the restaurant, and I want to have lunch with you. And you say, I'd love to, Dad, but I'm sorry, I have to return this lost object. And he says, no, you got to do this for me. So you're allowed to exempt yourself from dining or taking care of your father's needs in order to fulfill this mitzvah that came to you first. Lo yishmalo, you should not listen to him. Shenemar, ish imo ve'aviv tira'u ani Hashem. As the pasuk says, a man must revere his father and mother, but nonetheless, I am Hashem, which teaches me kulchem chayavim bichvodi, that all of you are obligated in my honor. And so, as the Imrei Yaakov just points out, he says, that even if a parent says, I need you to, let's say, do an errand for me, or give me to eat or drink, perish, de'im amar lo, al tachzirena kedei lavar al divrei Torah, pshita delo yikabel mimena. In other words, we're not talking about a parent who just gratuitously says, do not do that mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, there's no need for you to drive up to Ashua, you don't have to return lost objects, it's a silly thing to do, just you're wasting your time. So, because the parent has, let's say, a different value, they don't value this as a mitzvah, right? So obviously you're not supposed to listen to a parent who tells you not to follow the Torah. But we're saying even more than that. What we're saying is, not only if a parent instructs you not to follow the Torah simply because they don't feel that it's an important thing to do, but let's say they tell you, I don't want you to return that lost object because it's going to take you too long, and I want you to do something for me. Mikol makom lo yishmalo, but you should still not listen to the parent. Debahashavas aveda ika aseh v'lo saseh, because the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda contains both a positive and a negative commandment. Ve'ena aseh dochelos aseh va'aseh. And the positive commandment of honoring your parents, even though it's a mitzvah, it does not override an outstanding mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, which contains both a positive and a negative commandment of Hashev Teshivim, you shall surely return them, and Lo tuchal lihitalem, you do not have a right to hide. Uchedei shelo tomar akati mitzvat kibud va'em adifa dehuksha kvodo lichvod hamakom. And you might argue, he says, well, maybe the mitzvah of honoring my parents still takes priority over Hashavas Aveda, because at the end of the day, the honor of my parent is like honoring God. Mishum hachi yahiv otam, and that's why the Rav Shulchan Aruch has to tell you another issue, which is dichtiv ish imo ve'aviv tiro ani Hashem dikulchem chayavim bichvodi. No, he says, built into every mitzvah is that even if a parent tells you not to observe that mitzvah, you don't listen to the parent. In other words, even though normally the mitzvah of kibbud av va'em is one of the highest priority mitzvahs that you can possibly do, but it's only if a parent is not telling you directly to honor them through violating the Torah. Parent tells me, I want you to take me to Kiva's, which is a popular Jewish spot to eat, but at the same time it may not be kosher, right? I don't know about Kiva's. I just know that it's not under the rabbinic supervision. It's like a traditional Jewish place where old guys go out to eat. I only know that because I know an old guy who loves to go there, who's a member of our shul, and he's not particularly religious, so he tells me he goes to Kiva's all the time. I said, okay, very nice, but but if a parent tells you, I want you to take me to Kiva's, and you say, but Dad, it's not kosher, it doesn't have supervision, I don't know where they get their food from. He says, I want you to take me there anyway. So that would be a good example. You're not allowed to take your parent to eat non-kosher food, and they're going to get upset with you. We say, Dad, let me take you to another place that's kosher. I don't like the other place. I like Kiva's, and my friends are there, right? So that gets you into a whole dilemma, right? But that's the point. The point is that the mitzvah of kibbud av va'em does not override other mitzvot, because you have to listen to Hashem before you listen to a parent. Okay, so therefore, so that's why the mitzvah of kibbud av va'em does not exempt you from returning a lost object. Aval nidchet hi mitzvahs hashavas aveda v'chol kayotze ba mi mitzvahs shel hatzalas mamon chavero he nidches mipnei kvod hamakom. He says, but here's where the mitzvah of hashavas aveda is overridden. Where is it overridden? And any other mitzvah which has to do with helping save your friend's assets, that the mitzvah is overridden if you have to disregard God's honor. If God's honor is going to be disregarded, which means I'm going to have to do something either unethical or against the Torah in order to help my friend's money be saved, in order to do Hashavas Aveda or any other kind of financial help to my friend, then I have to be more concerned about Hashem's honor. What's an example? Kagon Shaha Aveda Beveit Sakvaros V'hu Kohen. So, for example, this is the classic example that's brought by the Gemara, that there's a lost object of my friend's in a cemetery, and because of that, and I'm a Kohen, and in order for me to retrieve the lost object, I would have to violate the law that a Kohen is not allowed to become Tameh in order to retrieve the lost object. So in that scenario, this is not a question of listening to my parents versus Hashavas Aveda, but rather listening to God versus Hashavas Aveda. And therefore, lo yitmala. And therefore, you're not allowed to, lo yitame la, you're not allowed to make yourself tameh for the sake of helping your friend out. Va'afilu iser shel divreihem lo yasa b'shvil mamon chavero. And even a rabbinic violation you should not do for the sake of your friend's money. Kagon lahagbia ma'os shematza b'Shabbos. Let's say you see your friend's money is on the street in front of their house. Big wad of cash that you assume your friend lost. It fell out of his pocket right before Shabbos. He was walking into his house and money fell out of his pocket right before Shabbos. And now at Shabbos you're on your way home from shul and you see your friend's wallet lying there in front of his house. So what should you do? Are you allowed to pick up the wallet in order to save your friend's assets? Well, at Shabbos the wallet is muktzah, so you wouldn't be allowed to pick it up directly in order to do that. And the reason is, even though that's only a rabbinic prohibition of muktzah is a rabbinic law, but nonetheless, you cannot disregard that mitzvah for the sake of saving your friend's money. And what's the reason? She'ein dochin iser mipnei mamon, she'nemar ani Hashem, that we don't override any prohibition for the sake of saving money. As it says, I am Hashem, kulchem chayavim bichvodi. You are all obligated in my honor. So therefore, as like the quote, going back to this last part of the pasuk, ani Hashem. Yes, you have to revere your parents. Yes, you have to listen to what they tell you, but don't forget that I'm God. And therefore, God's honor takes priority over any other mitzvah, including saving your friend's assets. And by the way, this has applications well beyond the Kohen wanting to help his friend retrieve his object that's in a cemetery or picking up his muktzah wallet. Now, of course, you can't pick up the muktzah wallet directly, but what you can do is you can help save your friend's wallet by kicking it, because kicking muktzah is perfectly legal on Shabbos, as long as you don't kick it more than 4 cubits when there's no eruv. But if there's a way for you to help save his money without handling the muktzah directly, that would be the preferred thing to do. You should definitely always view your friend's assets in the same way that you view your own. If you would try to save your wallet on Shabbos because it fell out and it's in the public on the sidewalk and you're worried someone's going to steal it, if you would do something to help save your own, you should also do it for your friend. You should feel the same compulsion to do so for your friend. The only question is, how do I do this in a way where I'm not going to be violating Shabbos? So there are ways around it. It's just that you can't pick it up directly. But I'll give you an example. What if my friend says, I have an opportunity for you to save me a tremendous amount of money, but it requires you to perjure yourself on a document, right? So, but it's not a big deal because no one's ever going to know about it. Just do me this one, this one solid, as they call it. I need you to do me this solid, right? And just help me out. And we enter into these kinds of situations all the time. Whether obviously Joby's on the line. if you're a doctor, and sometimes someone may ask you to sign some certification for them that they're healthy, or that, and you haven't examined them, and but he tells you, I need this for my life insurance policy. Come on, just do me this solid, and what difference does it make? It's not going to cost you anything, right? And so forth and so on. But you have to tell the person, but there's a law called Dina de Malchusa Dina. The law of the land is the law, and I have to obey the law. And that's my obligation as a Jew just as much as it is to eat kosher, right? I had a situation a few years back. There's a few companies here in town which are not with the LCBO, and yet they sell alcohol anyway because of this very strange, arcane law in Canada, in Ontario, that if you want to sell alcohol, it has to be done through the government. And the dispensation is that if the wine is used for sacramental purposes, then a non-government entity is allowed to sell the wine. Right? You're familiar with this? We have Simcha Wines. There used to be another company called Mazel Wines, which was actually closed down by the government because it was discovered that they had actually gone beyond what they were permitted to do. So there was another company, which will go unnamed, that came to me once a number of years ago and said, I'd like you to sign off on a series of forms that the wine that we are selling is for sacramental purposes. And I said, you just want me to, without knowing what you're selling the wine for, you want me just to sign off as a rabbi that you're selling them for sacramental purposes? I said, I can't do that. I said, first of all, I could get my synagogue in trouble, and I could also lose my license in Ontario as an officiant of religious ceremonies, which I have. It's something I got when I first came here. So I don't want to endanger that. But I said, but beyond that, you have to. I can't perjure myself that I can testify that everything that you're selling is for sacramental purposes. What if you're selling cases of wine to people who are making a party, and it has nothing to do with sacrament? So it's one of those actually very asinine laws, that the government has, but it's a law nonetheless. And so I'm not going to sign off on something that the government would not look kindly upon. And so I guess he was going up and down the Bathurst corridor trying to find rabbis to sign off on it. And he thought maybe I would be one of those guys who would just say, sure, no problem, I'll sign anything. But no, so I didn't sign it. I guess he went to the next rabbi. But anyway, so this is just the basic halacha that even though I can help someone financially, and I wanted to help the guy. Like, why wouldn't I want to help a fellow Jew be able to make a living, right? But at the end of the day, what he was asking me to do was in violation in some way, on some level, of my duty as a Jew to Hashem, to be truthful and to be honest, and so I couldn't do it. And the same thing here is even a rabbinic prohibition. You cannot justify violating it just because you'd be helping your friend save a tremendous amount of money. So it's something for us to keep in mind.
Rabbi, just going back to the Dina Mochu Dina, sometimes there's situations where I imagine vast majority of people fall into this situation. For example, let's say people have a cleaning lady. She comes in. You're going to pay her cash. Now, technically, what you're doing, you're paying her cash, and that's not really something proper to do. But that's just the reality of how things go in society.
Yeah, so you're asking an excellent question, and it's actually more prevalent where I come from in California, where it's so routinely done. There's a dispensation when it comes to Dina de Malchuta Dina, and I'll give you an example. The speed limit on the highway is 100 kilometers per hour, right? We all know that. Does that mean that if we go 110 kilometers per hour, we are in violation of Dina de Malchuta Dina, and we are violating our responsibilities as a Jew? Now, there may be some who say that, but we all know that the government has made it quite clear that as long as you're going under 120, they're not going to fine you. They're not going to stop you. In general, there's a social contract that the government will not go after you if you are slightly above the speed limit. Okay, and once that becomes common knowledge, then Dina de Malchuta Dina does not apply to that social contract anymore, because the government has essentially basically given us an implicit pass that this law has certain elasticity. So once something becomes common practice where the government itself acknowledges implicitly, that it doesn't even have to be explicit, but implicitly they acknowledge this is going on in society, we're not going to go after you for this infraction, because we understand that we need to be lenient in the enforcement of a certain policy, right? So therefore, Dina de Malchusa no longer applies to that practice. Now you have to be very careful about that, because this could be abused, right? It could be abused. So, for example, there are many people who will not pay HST on very, very significant kinds of expenditures based on that, and that's something that I feel is very wrong. We've talked about that, where you'll if you want to make a wedding and you don't want to pay HST because the costs are very, very high, right? So I don't feel that it's right to get out of paying HST when you're paying a photographer or a florist or anything like that. I think, or a caterer. I think you have to pay. You have to pay these vendors, because that's how our government makes money. It makes money off of those big item expenditures, and that's how we support the government. But apparently it's become an accepted thing to within certain circles of the religious community to disregard that, but that's not something where the government is willing to look the other way. They're not. Okay. Any other questions, comments? So Mazel Tov, we finished the chapter. We are ready to start the new chapter, Siman Hey, which is Dinei Ovrei Derachim V'Tzar Balei Chaim. This is it's very interesting how the Rav Shulchan Aruch puts these two topics together: the laws of travelers and the laws of inflicting pain upon animals. Why do you think these two halachas go together? Can anyone guess why these two halachas go together?
You have to transport animals to slaughterhouse, for example.
That's true, but
also you used to use animals as well for traveling, like donkeys.
That's right. That's right, Barry. Because this is written before the age of automobiles, right? And how did you travel? You traveled by animal, right? And so many times an animal is schlepping while you're traveling, you're transporting. How did you transport goods in the old world? Transported goods through animals. Animals had to undergo a lot of pain in helping human beings build society. So that's why these two halachas go together. And this is a very difficult set of halachas to study, because in today's world, there's a lot of pain that we're inflicting upon animals for food. and we're going to have to think about that when we learn this set of halachos. It's not going to be easy for us to get through this. I mean, we'll be able to get through it quite easily, but as far as struggling with our own modern technology of factory farming, which we'll talk about as we go on through this, and how we as Jews should have an attitude, what our attitude should be towards factory farming. It's something that I want to discuss with you when we study this chapter, and that's something that we'll start in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Okay, so I gotta do a lot of davening in a short amount of time, so I'm gonna get off the call now, and let me wish you again a happy Hanukkah. Take care, everybody.